Alrighty, welcome folks. I want to welcome you back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. This will be another little short one. Of course, once I get my capture card working and get other things going, I can go into some of these setups on this. This one is a thing I touched on before on networking switches, ports, all of those type of things, routers, Wi-Fi, access points. I'll have a short little one coming up after this on what a business grade kind of access point actually looks like. Maybe you're interested in something like that for your home. Maybe you have a rec center. Maybe you're working with someone. Maybe a church. Something of that sort that you might be interested in. But for this one is the firewall. I've mentioned before on previous videos, you have a physical firewall and you have a software firewall. Software firewall is actually in your computer. Usually nowadays Windows has a firewall in there, but you can go get other brands of firewalls and download, and virus scans and malware detection and Trojan horses and ransomware, all kinds of other software out there that you can put in a computer to protect your computer. So this is more of a safety issue to protect your computer from being infected and having someone have malicious software on your computer. A physical firewall is kind of different than that kind of a firewall virus scan situation that you have on your computer. You need both. You really need to have both. But the difference is some routers, Wi-Fi devices such like these. This one was a business grade one that I've showed before that actually has a firewall built in to the Wi-Fi. I like this device. This device isn't made anymore. They make some newer ones, but this device was a really good device. I still use it. I know it's really old. The bandwidth is slow, but if you're not in a place where you need a high bandwidth, where you're just connecting online to do inventory or something of that sort, just basic internet to broadcast data, to stay online, this device was great. Of course, now everybody wants, Wi-Fi 6 and all of that stuff. Goes back to the question of how fast is your internet? Having Wi-Fi 6 at 800 megabit and you only have a 50 meg internet connection, to me is pointless, because you're paying a lot of money for this device and new modern devices that are Wi-Fi 6 compatible or Wi-Fi 6 to use that feature when you really aren't using that feature because your internet speed's slower. So that's one reason why I still like this model, because not a lot of people are running high enough speeds. This I believe was G, this is N. So it's plenty fast still. So you have devices like this. The key part, going back to the firewall, is not about software. What software gets installed into your computer. This is actually really a complex security. This has to do with what can communicate to what, through what ports. Ports are really important when you get into security. One of the main factors that I have found a lot of lately, and it's one of the kind of bigger problems, is everybody wants to have smart home. They want to have AC control. They want to have heating control, lighting control, security cameras. All these different devices controlled by your phone. There's an issue with that. is all these devices communicate out to the internet. That's one thing. When your phone wants to communicate in, you have a different problem. That's why you have devices like firewalls. Excuse me. To prevent what comes into your network. So you put your Wi-Fi access point and all of those things past this. This would go from your internet provider, your cable modem, DSL modem, whatever you have, goes into here and then goes out. As you can see, there's lots of different ports. There's some models that only have one or two. There's a whole variable. So it'll tell you where the LAN and where the WAN is. So this has one line that is for in, 4 that go out. Depending on what kind of firewall you have, and depending on how sophisticated it is, you can actually tell it, okay, for port 1, I want you to block absolutely everything coming in. Port 2, go ahead and allow this, this, and this, and this, and this. Port 3, allow this, 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 and this. So, that is where it gets interesting. Because now, you can have multiple networks on here. Now, you could say, put Wi-Fi on here, put Wi-Fi on here, and say, okay, this Wi-Fi is for all my security cameras. Put it on a completely separate network. Put it on channel 2 on your Wi-Fi. Put in a separate Wi-Fi, channel 11, for home use. Your computer, your certain compliances that you want to keep completely secure. From that point, what happens is when you remote in on your phone, it'll let it go to port 2 or port 3, wherever you have that hooked up to, and not through to port 1 to your computer. Because you want to keep your computer secure. So there's a difference between a router and a firewall. So I wanted to come up with this and show everybody what an actual physical hardware firewall can look like. They come in different forms. They come rack mountable. They come in a lot of different forms. So I wanted to go through that real quick. Wanted to show everybody that, what it is. Basically, this blocks ports. That blocks the access in. And it's a lot to go through. For this first video, I will have to do a follow-up video on a lot of the ports and a lot of that stuff. And it's always changing. Ports are pretty much always changing. Because what it is you have these companies that come out with devices like security camera companies. They'll choose a certain port, usually that isn't the same as someone else, so that it's harder for people to hack into it and breach it and get into certain things because you don't know what port it is. That's important. Sometimes you have to go in there. You could do port forwarding, where you say something comes in at a port TCP of 380 and goes out port 1 or 5, I think is used, but you could choose what port. So that way people can't breach your network as easy. That's one of the things I found with the smart home type of things, is the more devices you add, the more ports it opens. So this is really one of the concerns I have right now with everything going cloud-based. port 80 goes out to the internet. But a lot of things use port 80 plus other things. Plus 138, plus 3000, plus 1500, plus 1501, plus, 1800, plus, all these different communication channels that it uses. So it opens all these ports. So if you load a piece of software in that opens 10 ports, you load in another piece thing, opens another 10 ports, opens another 10 ports, opens another 10 ports. You can have 80 or 90 ports open that you don't really realize. Someone can come up and port scan your network. Figure out what ports you have open. Figure out how they can compromise you. So this is really where the security part gets really complicated and more technical. I know a lot of people, when I've talked to them about some things, I don't know. Because nobody's really looked into it. Nobody's asked them. Nobody's brought that up to them until I do. So it was kind of another thing that nobody talks about. Yeah, this technology is great, but there are some downfalls to having too much of this technology. Because you're creating some kind of issues also. But you can always do a firewall. I know they're pricey. They can be pretty expensive depending on what features you need. But if you're really worried about security or you're running a home business, and nowadays, everybody's working from home, really, how safe is a computer? This is really one of the issues that I've come up with that I thought of a lot of lately, is you have 5 people working from home remoting in to your system. How secure are those systems at home? What fire scans, what firewalls are running on it? This is something as an IT person that really you should know. You should be knowing what they have. You should know what systems they're running. They shouldn't be using their home computer to log in to your network. They should have a laptop or some other device from work with work security on it, with a VPN and all these other type of things. But the thing people don't realize is a VPN is a secure connection from point to point. So if I have a dirty computer that's infected with whatever, and I VPN into your computer, you're giving me a secure point-to-point with a dirty computer. So that's one thing that I want to bring up, because when you troubleshoot, you do any of those type of things, the support companies that, just give me remote access to your computer. You give them remote access to your computer. You don't know what else you can have, what they can be doing. Where else are they accessing? Yeah, they accessed your computer, but guess what? They're also on your network because they're in your computer. So I wanted to bring that factor up. Something like this can really prevent a lot of that, because you can actually block any kind of remote access. So you can have remote access on this computer and log in on another computer on your network to this computer, but this will tell anybody on the outside, no, you can't do that. It'll stop it here before it gets into your network. So there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of details, a lot of information that I can't even come up with right now off top of my head on what these actually do. They can do a lot. They are very important. Other factors is you can have computers hooked onto here, and you could tell it, this computer cannot even talk to that computer. This computer cannot talk to that computer. They can't see each other. You can actually have them completely separate in case you need completely separate networks. So there's a lot of variables you can do. So it's kind of nice. So this is one of the factors I kind of wanted to bring up, because like I mentioned with the security cameras, a lot of security cameras are not 5 gig network. They're 2.4. Some, you can buy some of the fancier ones that are. But you can actually, now, because you have like Wi-Fi 6 and whatever other generations coming out, is let's say you decide you want to go to a Wi-Fi 6, you want, or a mesh network, something different, you can actually keep all your wireless configurations the way they are. Hook it on here, hook the firewall up a different route, block, certain things. You can do whatever you want. A lot of times there's default profiles that will help you. You can research. You can find out, okay, I want to block this, I want to block that. Whatever you're using on the other side of the network, you can block. You can set up a whole nother network, put in Wi-Fi 6, put on a Wi-Fi 6 router, hook your laptop up to it, and know it's secure from any kind of breaches coming in from any of your smart lights, cameras, thermometers, AC controls. What else do they have now? DirecTV receivers, cable receivers. There's all kinds of stuff they're doing now. Refrigerators. They even have smart refrigerators. That's one thing that I always am kind of curious about. You put that on your Wi-Fi network, what kind of security does that thing really have? Those ones that can tell you when, oh, you're almost out of milk, do you want me to order you milk? Can you imagine if someone hacks into that and sends an order to Walmart? Come pick up your order of all kinds of stuff, and not to mention how that would hurt the business because you're canceling it, you're doing all kinds of stuff, and who knows what. It might send orders through on your little devices that you speak into, your all these little things that are out there for smart homes and technology and all these things that really kind of shine a light on security again for me. So I kind of wanted to touch on that on this firewall, because that's really what a firewall can kind of do. Almost all businesses should be running a firewall. If you're a small business or something else like that doesn't have one, little community center that doesn't have one, hey, they're worth it. You need it. You should be having that, because now we got this war going on over there with all this cyber terrorism junk that they keep talking about that can happen, that can make things worse. This might be something that helps you out, is having a firewall. Not necessarily this brand, but this is what I had on hand, so this is what I wanted to show. Because this is what a lot of them are. If you get into the big business rackable ones, those are basically the same thing, they're just bigger and rackable. This is pretty much, I think, a medium-sized firewall. They make smaller, they make larger, so you can look around, you can shop around, look at the features. The features are big, because there's all kinds of things that are out there. But, like I said, and I've showed this before, I picked this up for $10. Okay, you have a firewall in here. You could set this firewall. This can actually be used as this. So that's just an option out there. If you have a good Wi-Fi network and you're looking to add a firewall and you want to, a separate network, you can always do that. You can always set this up for a guest network. If you have a bunch of people coming over, you don't really want them on your network. Most routers, this one especially, will set up guest networks. I believe this one was like 5 guest networks. So, you can set up guest networks on these also. But it's the same hardware. If you're using it and they're using it, it's going to slow down because it's the same hardware it's talking to. So for the prices some of these things are, it's really not worth it. I mean, I'm not going to go out and buy a Wi-Fi 6 for me and a Wi-Fi 6 in case I have a guest. Odds are, for a guest network, I'll be using something like this because they're not going to be using any kind of heavy broadband. If they're there, they're going to be looking to check their emails or do whatever they need to do while they're there. So that's one of the factors I wanted to bring up, is it's not necessarily only a standalone firewall. But you can use something like this, a business grade Wi-Fi with firewall. I believe it actually states with firewall on this. And this one actually has VPN in it. So this can do a virtual private network from this device to another device, if you need those features. So I wanted to point that out, that there are multiple things that you can use and what are out there that if you shop around and you look, but a lot of people don't really realize what a hardware firewall actually is and what it's used for. A lot of people think I got my firewall on my computer, I'm okay. Yeah, you can be okay for your computer. How about your phone and all your other devices you attach to your Wi-Fi? So, wanted to separate a physical firewall from a software firewall on really what the differences are. They're not actually the same. They're actually completely different. So I wanted to elaborate that so people understand the difference between the physical firewall and the software firewall. The software firewall is for your computer or your device it's actually on. This firewall is for your network. All your routers, switches, Wi-Fi, all your other devices that will actually attach to any other devices that are plugged into this device. That's a big difference because now you have TVs that have cameras in them, that have all this other stuff in them that really can be a security concern. You don't want someone breaching that, hacking that, crashing the software on your phone or on your TV or anything else like that, because you paid $800 for that TV and now you can't get software on it for it to run. Because a lot of TVs are smart TVs, are technology TVs. They're not standard TVs anymore. If you have just an old standard TV that doesn't have any of the smart technology or anything like that, you'll probably be okay. But a good firewall is always a good thing to have. One of the other key things with firewalls is you pretty much get what you pay for. More expensive firewalls are more expensive for certain reasons. A lot of times, and that's one of the other things you got to look at, is how much data this can handle. If you're in a business, usually there's a lot of data transfer. You have email servers, you have other things that come through a firewall. Those are the rackable mount business grade firewalls. There's a reason why those are so much more expensive than your home grade, because of all the data that goes through. So if you're in an area that has really high bandwidth internet, if you're dividing your networks into multiple networks, your computer network, your camera network, and this and that, and you're going to be going back and forth through that network a lot. Let's say you have IP cameras where you got to actually access the camera to watch the video. You might want to look at how much data bandwidth this can actually handle. But if you're just someone at home, a business that has internet, to go on to whatever organization to verify information, to do little simple things, you should be fine with a basic firewall. I haven't run into any issues with that one where I've used it, but it's basically internet based only. It's not really handling email traffic. It's not handling a lot of other stuff. It's basically just for internet. So that probably suits a lot of people's needs. So I wanted to touch on some of these variables because, again, this is something I'm not hearing anybody talk about anymore. You got Windows 10, you got Windows 11, you got the integrated firewall, you should be okay. And then you have other people that go, well, I don't really trust that firewall, you should get something else. That's it. That's the information they're giving you. Guess what? I want to tell you, a lot of settings that are in here are in here. All your IP configs, your IP blocks, all of those things can be configured in your computer also. I don't hear anybody talking about that anymore. I know there's certain profiles and certain things that they have done with Windows to set as defaults in certain things. But again, depending on what kind of business you're doing, you might want to consider upping some of those securities, upping some of that stuff, adding an additional device. If you can get something like this for $300, $400, $200, I think they even have some for $60 or $70 they used to have, and to kind of configure it to lock out some things where you can go back in and reconfigure and lock more is a better security than not doing anything. So that is one of the factors I wanted to bring up. If you're in a business where you have all your internet and emails, everything online, you might want to put this in to block any kind of incoming email ports or anything that might be open because you don't need it. That's all hosted on the internet. You're using port 80 or port, 443 or some other port to access those emails. You may not want to have any kind of ports open other than that. So that's where a security expert comes involved, a networking security expert, because they can lock things down, they can do a lot of things for you. Again, one of the other big things, get all documentation of what that person has done, what your login is, what your password is, what ports are open, what ports are closed. If they put in specific rules, what is the rule and what does it control? You want to get all of this information because you might need to change something in the future. You don't need to call someone back to open up a port if you know what they did. You can go in there and specify, open this port as a higher priority than blocking all these ports. This port is exempt from this list. You can do certain things that really are easy enough and document. You always want to have your documents on this because that's one of the things that go in to help people. I don't have anything on that. Why? Oh, because this guy came and did it, and then I called someone else that came and did this and did that. Okay, but what else did they change? They have no clue because the person didn't give them any kind of paperwork. They charged them a lot of money to do what they needed to do, but then they didn't have any documentation or know what actually happened to any of the settings. The person could have came, factory reset it, and went in and changed a couple things and left. You don't know. So you're thinking you have all these settings, but you don't. So that's just really one of the things I wanted to bring up is there's a lot of settings that are in here that are in here. But again, these aren't the same. These are two different physical layers of security. Layers is really a complicated term when you come into networking security. There are multiple layers. Same with switches. Layer 1, Layer 2, Layer 3, packet handling, and all these type of things that come into play. So, that's another factor too with these. If you have a Layer 3 switch that handles virtual networks, all these type of things, bigger businesses, you may need to find those features in here. Most of these probably won't do Layer 3 and all of that type of stuff. They're just basically looking at IPs, what's coming in at where. They don't deal with virtual networks and all of that type of stuff. So you want to look at those kind of features if you're using those kind of features. And of course, if you're using those kind of features, you're probably a big enough business. You're paying a support company to come in, install that, configure it, and those type of things. But you need to know this information so you can verify that the support company is doing what you actually need them to do. And you have the documentation of what they did. So that way you know what you need is done. But you need to have some of the information and the knowledge to verify that that looks right. And if there's something you question it. Ask them. They'll tell you. If there's a certain port you really think you need blocked and you tell them, oh, shouldn't that port be blocked? And they tell you, well, no, because it's actually being used for this and this and this and this nowadays. That's important because that's information you're going to need to know in the future. Because if you ever put in those kind of devices that they opened up that port for, you're going to need to know that. So they have all the updated knowledge. So that's kind of one of the features I wanted to bring out is to know. And if you do that, ask them. Because that's the critical information you're probably going to need in the future. Document it. Write it down. Put a note in with your other documentation from them. So that way, in the future, if you're looking at that, we can do that. Or, you know what, he did close that port and he mentioned it to me. I'm going to have to open that port up. Because it's kind of a pain later on to get a hold of someone that set something up and it's 2 years later. Maybe that tech ain't there no more. The company ain't there no more. Got bought out by somebody else. You never know what happened. So having your documentation is critical. Maybe you call up that company and they're quoting you $10,000 for a job and you like the work they did, but you have 3 other quotes for $6,000 instead of $10,000. Maybe you would end up deciding, well, I really need to save the money. I can't afford an extra $4,000 for the same work. Well, you don't have any documentations, you don't have anything. Then that other company has to do more work that'll probably cost you more money to get that information. Where if you had that information, it would save you money. So, wanted to bring up some of those points for home users too. Saves you money. So, I hope that's enough on firewall, the physical firewall, your software firewall, understanding they're completely two different things. They actually do the same kind of job, but one's actually in the computer. This is for your network or multiple networks to control what comes in and then gets distributed. And that could be different between Wi-Fi network A, Wi-Fi network B, Wi-Fi network C, and your hardwired networks. There could be different settings for those in a lot of these. So it's really kind of important that you know that. Most of the time, probably in the old days, I would say nobody had a multiple network A and B. nowadays with the security, like I said, you may want A for your home devices, B for all your smart devices. Not to mention, that's two different Wi-Fi routers that if you're streaming a movie, all your cameras and everything else aren't using the same device that you're trying to use. So I wanted to bring that up because internet speeds, they keep talking about they want to do all this fiber, they want to do all this stuff. Internet speeds look like they're going to increase. They have increased here. They used to be very slow. Now it's like 100 meg for the company I got. I'm very happy with that. It used to be 10, and then it went to 20, then it went to 30, and then it went to 50, and then it jumped to 100, all within like 2-year span. So for the longest time, I had an older cable modem that was only able to do like 20 or whatever it was. But finally, when they got up to the 100, I had to go out and buy a new one. Because I was only getting 20 megs out of the possible 100 I could actually get. So that's the same factor that I said with knowing how much data these can actually process and handle. You want to know that information to make sure this doesn't actually slow down your network. But nowadays, almost everything's gigabit connections or more. Some of these, that's another factor with businesses now, you have higher speeds than gigabit. So you might need to look at what the ports actually are if you're in a business. You know, 2 gig, I think there's like a 4 gig or 3 gig, there's a 5 gig, there's a 10 gig, there's a 20 gig, I think there's a 50 gig. There's a lot of different ports out there that use Ethernet cable, Cat 5, not Cat 5, Cat 6 and above. So that's one of the factors that I wanted to bring up, because depending on what devices you buy and how you buy it, Wi-Fi 6, I'm sure is gig port. Haven't seen anything faster than that on them, but I'm sure here in the next couple years, that's going to be the next thing, a faster port on them. So once that goes to a faster port, you'll need other faster ports on other devices. So that's just one of the factors I wanted to bring up, is to know your network ports. I'm pretty sure I brought that all up on the switches and the routers and all of those type of factors also. But this goes into the same category as your switches and your routers and your hubs and your Wi-Fi access points, all of those type of things. This goes into that same category. So I think I'll wrap this one up. I've gone on long enough. I think I've covered enough basics on the firewall, the importance of it, the differences between the two. So thank you. I'll wrap this one up and get going on my next one.